Okay, so I have a few different things to talk about today. There's just a lot going on, and I don't think I can break each topic into separate days unless I just won't cover everything that I want to cover. So let's get into it. It really does feel as though things are becoming more hostile, more divided, just far more unstable, culturally speaking, and in terms of social cohesion. And yes, I think it also feels as though racism is getting worse. Part of that, obviously, is because the word racism is now used to describe too many different things at once. Activists have stretched and expanded the definition so widely that it now captures almost anything someone finds slightly uncomfortable, offensive. And when that definition expands, then of course the appearance of racism expands with it. But I also think there is a real increase in racist sentiment, a genuine rise, and I'm sure you can agree with me on this. And I think we need to talk honestly about this if we want to understand what's happening underneath the surface. So I came across a tweet by Lucy White essentially complaining about the ethnicity and birthplace of the Deputy Speaker of the Commons, Nusgani. And here it is here. And the tweet went viral. It sparked enormous debate and also received backlash from every corner of the political spectrum. People called it racist and accused it of crossing the line. And, I think it did cross the line too. But before we go there, I think we need to understand the broader environment we are living in. These are volatile times. There is a battle over identity happening in Britain, whether people like it or not, whether people see it or not. And the so called white majority, white British people, are fighting. And it's not even just about dominance, there's also a longing for continuity, for the right to feel at home in a country that suddenly feels unfamiliar. There is a clear sense of loss, of something that's slipping away, their nation, cultural confidence, and in some cases, their sense of power too. And there is also this deep uncertainty about what comes next. What comes next? What happens to them if the demographic trajectory continues and they do become a minority in the country that they built and inherited? It's not an easy place to be. It's not an easy thought to sit with because it triggers fear, defensiveness, resentment, and sometimes a desire to cling to whatever symbolic ground that still feels solid. And I think that's why we are seeing more reactions like the Lucy White tweet, right? There should not be a single person born in Pakistan in the UK House of Commons. We will see more of this because, from the perspective of many people, it's never just, oh, one person or just one MP or just a few newcomers. That was exactly what they were told about their towns and their neighborhoods, their schools. Oh, just a few families, just a little change, just a few newcomers. But then the change accelerated, and now there are entire regions, entire cities where the white British population is the minority. So when these same people think that they're seeing the same shifts in parliament, they don't see a neutral appointment or an isolated case. They see another step in a trajectory that they've lived and seen before. So naturally, the question follows, if we become a minority in our communities, will we one day become a minority in parliament too? And if so, what happens to us then? That fear, however inarticulately or aggressively expressed sometimes, is there and it's real. And unless we address the underlying fear with honesty rather than just constant moral condemnation alone, then we will see more hostility, we will see more division, we will see these expressions of resentment more and more. But in saying all of this, I know there's genuine fear and uncertainty, but you also cannot allow the pressures of the time that we're living through to turn this legitimate fear into just outright racism. Feeling anxious about cultural change is one thing. Allowing that anxiety to harden into something or hostility against individuals purely because of their skin color or birthplace is something entirely different. Looking at someone not for their actions or competence or character, but just for the color of their skin, that is racial thinking. It is racial thinking. That is racial thinking in its most basic form and definition. You can criticize behavior, you can critique patterns, you can discuss cultural practices that have consequences, but you cannot jump from this group has produced some worrying patterns Two, every individual from that group must therefore be the same. This was Lucy White's reasoning. She hinted that because Nusgani was born in Pakistan, then she must somehow carry the traits of other Pakistanis involved in, for example, grooming gangs, or that she must harbor some sectarian political instincts seen in other parts of the Pakistani diaspora. But what proof is there that she does? What evidence is there that suggests that Nusgani is personally implicated in any of those patterns? She has spent years serving her constituency, working within British institutions, contributing to public life. She appears to love her role and her nation from what I saw myself. And unless there's evidence that emerges to suggest otherwise, you cannot simply project communal guilt onto her because it feels like a convenient explanation for you. I think it's wrong. I think it's morally, politically, and intellectually wrong. Britain today is a multiracial nation. This is a demographic reality. And the truth is that most people actually in this country, including actually those uneasy about rapid immigration, they don't actually have a problem with racial diversity per se. What they do and what they might struggle with is multiculturalism in the ideological sense. You know, the idea that society must fragment into separate moral and cultural worlds, you know, none allowed to take precedence, none expected to assimilate into a shared national identity. So, multiculturalism, it really does fracture societies, but multiracialism, it doesn't have to. But if you do decide that seeing someone's skin color is enough to declare them illegitimate, if you can't separate critique of cultural systems from blanket judgments about individuals, then you're not really defending your country. You're actually undermining the very cultural coherence you claim to protect. We should be clear on the facts, by the way. Nusgani is a Conservative MP. She wasn't planted, right? She wasn't planted. When the time came to choose a deputy speaker, she was elected by MPs across the House through a democratic process under the rules of Parliament itself. A majority of her colleagues looked at her record, her temperament, her work ethic, her service, and decided she was fit for the role. If you believe in democracy, that matters. If you believe in parliamentary sovereignty, that matters even more because this is what Britain stands for. So the question is it wrong to have someone born in Pakistan serving in that position? Is the mere fact of her birthplace enough to disqualify her, regardless of her conduct, her values, her loyalty? Because if the answer is yes, then we are not talking about protecting cultural identity anymore. We are talking about rejecting individuals on the basis of something that they cannot change. That will take us down a path that Britain, yes, despite all its flaws, has never wanted to walk. So I'm genuinely curious. What do you think? Is it inherently wrong for someone with a background to hold that office? Is the real problem not her, but the unresolved anxiety about what Britain is becoming? Let me know. Now, the next thing I want to talk about. So, a video has been circulating of a Nigerian man eating on Tower Bridge in a way that most people would probably recognize as not appropriate in a public setting. So, yeah, he was on Tower Bridge eating, you know, dropping food everywhere on the ground, making a mess, you know, drawing a kind of attention that instantly makes viewers. I was very uncomfortable watching this. But the interesting thing about it is that the loudest criticism has actually come from Nigerians themselves because they understand clearly how moments like this shape perception, especially in a country where migration and integration are clearly sensitive topics. So this person said, by the way, dear Nigerians, this is an opportunity to tell ourselves the truth. I love the truth. The vast majority of Nigerians inside Nigeria do not even eat in this manner. So why leave Nigeria and do this? Right? From a health point of view, it's unhygienic. From a common sense, right? Common sense point of view, it's just plain dumb. You only end up portraying us all as uncivilized. And I wonder why the need for this attention seeking um and I wonder why the need for this attention seeking retarded display. So let's stop doing shit like this, right? And I don't know what was said wrong there. Nothing was said wrong. He was exactly spot on, right? A lot of Nigerians, in other parts of the world that saw this in Canada as well, they're upset and rightly so, right? If you don't want to feed stereotypes, then don't portray and don't act in ways that confirms stereotypes. This is not very difficult. And I guess the question is, why do some people come to Britain and behave in ways that they would never dare to behave in their home country? The man in this video would not be eating like that, dropping food everywhere, treating a major landmark as if it was his personal dining table. He wouldn't do that back in his home country. He wouldn't. There's social consequences, there's embarrassment, there's shame. But it seems when some of these people arrive in Britain, then the dynamic in their mind seems to change. Not because Britain lacks standards, of course not. Britain has standards, it's unwritten rules and cultural codes. But it does seem that enforcing and talking about those standards has become almost impossible, especially when the person so called misbehaving is from a minority group. People hesitate, they freeze, they look away. They don't want to be accused of racism. They don't want a confrontation that ends up online with half the context missing, right? And a caption designed to destroy their reputation. How many instances of that have we seen? So, in other words, people are taking liberties in Britain because Britain is allowing liberties to be taken. And this is one of those hidden problems of modern multiculturalism. People arrive in Britain and suddenly act as if normal rules no longer apply. They treat the country like a place where they can behave in ways they would never attempt at home. Some of them come from places where public standards are genuinely lower. Others do come from places where the standards are quite strict. But the point is, people are coming with problematic mindsets and attitudes, and Britain just absorbs everything, makes space for everything, rarely pushes back. And people quickly learn that they can get away with behavior here that would be shut down immediately in their own societies. Anyway, so now let's look at this grand revelation that I saw recently about immigration. Soaring immigration is fueling Britain's housing crisis, says Bank of England's chief economist. No shit, Sherlock. The most striking thing about this is that it seems to be taking Britain's top institutions to acknowledge something the public is very well aware of. The housing crisis is not about greedy landlords or even some delays in construction. The basic reality is that demand has grown at a pace that the country simply cannot keep up with. When you add hundreds of thousands of people to the population each year, okay, latest figures are showing that it's down, fine. But the pressure, there is still pressure. And that pressure is immediate and unavoidable. And as we know, if you mention this link between high immigration and increased pressures on certain systems, then you're deemed inappropriate or racist. But now we have here the Bank of England's chief economist stating it plainly. Housing shortages, soaring rents, competition for stock, all of it is made worse. Even if you want to blame structural, logistical, or infrastructural issues, it is still made worse by sustained high levels of immigration. And what people need to understand is when people complain about immigration, it's not even a complaint about migrants or just blaming issues on migrants. No, they're blaming the government, but are also saying that the high influx of thousands of people, even though it's down now, okay, but it's still a high influx of thousands of people, it's not helping the situation. This is the lived experience of anyone trying to rent a flat, buy a home, or simply understand why prices keep rising. You cannot build your way out of a crisis if the number of people needing housing rises faster than the number of homes you can physically produce. This should force a serious rethink. A country that wants to fix its housing crisis, it can't ignore the scale of demand. It cannot pretend that immigration and housing policy are separate issues. It cannot keep insisting that the public concern is rooted in racism or ignorance, even when the Bank of England is literally saying the same thing, or at least their chief economist. The housing market is not struggling because of one mistake or one policy failure. It's struggling because the pressures placed on it are far greater than the system was ever designed to handle. Until that's acknowledged honestly, then no amount of new building targets or even clever planning reforms will make a meaningful, lasting difference. So, yeah, I have a few other things to talk about, but I think I will leave that there for today. Um, let me know about anything that I've discussed or anything else that you've seen happening lately in relation to these topics. And yeah, that's it from me for today. Um, and I will see you again next time.